got group one, Chloe and Yad.
Yep.
Talking about
I'm good, man.
bioreactors. Yeah, there should be extra Senegal forms. We got extra Senegal forms?
Oh.
Laura, good, Laura. We have them. Laura.
Alright, so thank you for coming to our presentation. Just as a formality, this is Chloe, and I'm Mia, and today, as you all know, we're going to be talking about composting bioreactors. Just to give you a skeleton of our presentation, we're going to start with the purpose of our design, the heat redistribution system, materials and methods, results, improvements, and what we plan on doing in design 3. So I've crossed a couple of you guys outside of class, and you've asked me, what is the purpose of having uniform composting? Why is it important? Having uniform composting is important because you can guarantee that your final product is completely cured, meaning that it has gone through the mesophilic and thermophilic phase, and you don't have pockets of compost that are still at different phases or that have pathogenic microorganisms that could be harmful. So what was the objective of our design 2 project? Why did we spend time on it? Initially, we wanted to prove that our heat redistribution system was functional, so a proof of concept. Then we want to do our research, and by doing our research, we mean building the barrels to see what type of issues we would encounter, and also as a stepping stone, because our design 2 is kind of a prototype for our final design. So you've all seen the slide before. It involves the components within our heat redistribution system. At the center of the heat redistribution system, you'll find a heater core taken from a car. You'll find copper tubing, and you'll find essentially braided plastic piping that connects the copper tubing to the heater core, and you'll find a cap on top with a 4-inch hole, the 200-liter polyethylene barrel with a 4-inch hole on the bottom, a mesh grid, and the heater core itself. So how does it work? So essentially what happens is that at 35 degrees Celsius, when the compost heats up, you can see here our design. At 35 degrees Celsius, we determined it was 35 degrees Celsius by putting the heater core in a water bath, setting it at 35 degrees Celsius, and at 35 degrees Celsius, the water started flowing throughout our system. So what happens is that when the compost heats up, the density of the water within the heater core drops, and the water starts flowing throughout the copper tubing, hopefully distributing the heat uniformly throughout the barrel, causing what we think is uniform composting. In terms of the barrel itself, all we had to do is make sure that the insulation was proper, it was uniform, we have mineral wool on the inside and bubble wrap on the outside. So then, easier said than done, we took the heat distribution system, put it within the barrel, and used engineer's best friend, tie wraps, to make sure that the heater core was really at the center of the barrel. In terms of recipe?
Okay, so we mentioned this briefly last time in our update. Essentially, we went through our literature review to get an idea of what the TS and volatile solid content would be of both dog food and wood chips, to know how much we would have to purchase. Once the material is purchased, we then went about calculating the actual TS content, moisture contents, and volatile solids. So initially the numbers we found were 22 and 16 for dog food and wood chips respectively. We went about calculating that by determining the percent carbon, which was found through the TS and volatile solids, and then the nitrogen content per kilogram of food. These numbers are based on the ideal scan ratio for compost, that's 30. The second most important parameter is moisture content. In our case, we wanted a moisture content of 60% to ensure that the compost was in its optimal condition. We first calculated the volume of our barrels. We then assumed the density and calculated the mass that would be necessary. So from this mass, which is 82.5, we subtracted dog food and wood chips. This left us with about 40 or 49 liters of water. We have to account for a little bit of this water in the dog food and the wood chips. They're practically dry, but there is a very small amount. That was about 4.9 liters. So so we had about 45 liters to add into our barrel. And these are the numbers that we had to add per barrel. We then took advantage of the water absorption capacity of our wood chips. So soaking them for 3 days enabled us to increase their wood chip content to 53. So initially that was about, it would range between 10 to 16%. Once this was done, we then had little issues with thermocouples. We managed to find and to borrow 9. The 9 other ones had to be rebuilt. So it was a simple wire. The 2 ends had to be welded together to ensure that they were stuck together, so they wouldn't be getting 2 different readings. We then attached them to old welding rods. So we recycled these rods, for one, instead of throwing them in the garbage. And second, they were exactly the right length and the same length as the previous thermocouples we had. They were then inserted into the plates. This goes into the data logger. So there are 2 terminals for each. These are the different channels that we have to plug them in. You'll see later on the graph there are numbers in hundreds, so 101, 102. These correspond to different channel numbers for each of the thermocouples. We then went about labeling them to ensure that the thermocouples weren't placed in the wrong section, and because that could drastically have affected our results. So on the left you see our control barrels, A, B, and C, and on the right here are our heat redistribution systems, which we named HRA through C. Each one of these barrels is fitted with 3 different thermocouples. So 1 being the lower, 2 in the middle, and 3 the highest one. So these are respectively 33, 52, and 70 centimeters from the very bottom of the barrel. The mixture. This is why it was very important to determine the water we have to add. So on the left, you see what it looks like once we just added all the materials together, and it took at least 45 minutes of soaking to get this lovely mixture. Essentially, we have to be flipping it over every 10 or 15 minutes to ensure that the dog food was absorbing as much water as it could. If not, all this water would just have leaked out through a barrel, and the moisture content would have gone down to about 20 or 30. This is what it looks like once the setup was completed. So the barrels are filled with a compost mixture. The top covers were taped around so that all the heat loss would be going out that 4-inch hole if there was heat loss. And the data logger is in the center.
So the data logger was set to take readings every 15 minutes. And every day, as you can see, there is a white line there. That's the white cable. It's a USB cable. I would connect my laptop, upload the data, and then just start the data logger off again. Now, everyone gets excited about results. So in terms of results, there's 3 things that just stand out. And one of these things is what's going on with this green thermocouple here, which is the top thermocouple. Essentially what happened is that in every experiment there's issues, and what happened is we didn't take into account compaction. So throughout the composting phase, the compost ended up compacting, and the top thermocouple ended up measuring ambient air within our barrel instead of the compost itself. But because we have 12 other thermocouples, we decided, okay, our results are still statistically sound, so we'll just look at the center and bottom thermocouple, which are evenly spaced. The center and bottom thermocouple are represented respectively from the blue and red lines on the graph. And again, the first thing that you notice is that the temperature attained by the barrel containing the heat redistribution system here on the left is higher than the control barrels. And this is the same I'll show you for all our controls and all our barrels here with the heat redistribution system. That being, and this is a hypothesis, that because the temperature is evenly distributed throughout the barrel, we permit the thermophilic nature bacteria or microorganisms to attain their full life cycle, therefore pushing the temperature of the barrel at higher levels. Whereas our controls, because there's pockets and some of it is at the mesophilic phase, some of it's at the thermophilic phase, it's not able to attain the full life cycle of the thermophilic bacteria. Now, another thing that you notice, and that we'll show you in the other barrels as well, is the fact that our temperature here seems to converge in our system that has a heat redistribution mechanism. Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to demonstrate that temperature is uniformly distributed throughout the composting media. Here are the results for the other barrels. So as I said, another depiction of what we're trying to do. And more importantly, here what we did is we just took the center thermocouple in our control barrel, and we did minus the bottom thermocouple, and we graphed the difference, took the absolute value and we graphed the difference to be able to compare it with our barrels fitted with the heat redistribution system. And you can see that the barrels that have our design within them have a temperature difference or a temperature gradient that is smaller than the barrels that don't have, or the control barrels that aren't fitted with the heat distribution system. So essentially, we believe that it worked.
Just a little detail of the scale where axis has disappeared, but vertically it's the temperature, and at degrees Celsius, the temperature difference, and on the bottom, all these numbers here are the number of readings recorded by the data logger.
So here in terms of bacterial growth, you can tell that after day 1, we had some bacterial growth at the surface. After day 3, the thermocouple is already exposed. And by day 6, the thermocouple is completely exposed, but you can see in terms of fungus and bacterial growth, it just covers the whole surface and exposes the rest of the barrel. Now, again, in terms of issues, in every experiment there's issues, and this was taken on Sunday. You can notice that there's a 7 centimeters drop from the top of the barrel, or not from the top of the line of the compost to where the compost sits today. This is from the top 4-inch hole. So again, in terms of issues, we encountered 3 big issues. Essentially, the first one was leachate. There was a significant amount of leachate, so we're going to have to find a way to deal with that so we don't have to go and pick it up and dump it back into the barrel, which isn't very sanitary. Then we had the compaction issue, which exposed our top thermocouple, and then we had the heat loss through the top hole.
So we're assuming that all the heat that was lost through that top 4-inch hole, since we're assuming also that they were very, very well insulated. Our solution to address this issue would be an air-to-air heat exchanger. So how this functions is you would have, this is for a household system, so we're going to use it for a barrel. I'll just try to translate the terms. The fresh air from outside would essentially be the ambient air in the barn where we're located. It would come in and be warmed by the incoming stale air or very warm air from our barrel. So the airs, it's important to mention that these 2 air streams don't mix, but the warmth of it will warm up our new air. So as this new air is warmed out, it's coming back into our barrel from the bottom 4-inch hole. And the stale air, still warm, is exiting. We're getting rid of it. So not only are we redistributing your heat, we're getting new fresh air that's very oxygenated. So we're trying to enhance our aerobic activity. So this is a rough sketch of what it will hopefully look like in design 3. This is our heat distribution system, and we have our coils and heater core at the top. We'll be keeping the system since it works very well, and we're trying to enhance it, which is why we're adding that component. So we'll be looking at different heat exchangers, so which ones would be ideal for our particular situation, and different materials, insulating materials, for the connecting to them.
So in conclusion, as you can notice, we did encounter 3 major issues that we're hoping to remediate, or we will hopefully remediate for the design 3 final design. And we're hoping to be able to get statistically valid data maybe for publishing or for someone to use this at a larger scale. We'd like to thank Dr. Clark, Dr. Agavan, and Dr. Barrington for giving us access to our lab, and Scott and Sam for their hands-on knowledge. Any questions?
A quick question or two?
What?
For the compaction, do you
Yeah.
intend to keep the vertical barrel, or maybe you will put it on the ground and rotate it?
No, I think we're going to keep the vertical barrel, but I think the volume of compost that we had was not enough. So we were a little stingy on the amount of dog food because it's still expensive. It's around $500 of dog food and wood chips. So we didn't buy enough, I believe, and just if we had more and we had it have, I don't know, a buffer of 10 centimeters over the top thermocouple, then we wouldn't have this issue. We also did total solid analysis that we didn't have time to talk about in the presentation, volatile solid analysis. So maybe we can take that into consideration to determine how much.
Actually, on that note, the samples that we analyzed, the final density was about 600. So we had assumed 550, so it was fairly close. That wasn't the issue. It was a matter of adding more of the mixture to account for this. And just to address Jonathan's point, if we were to put it on the side and to rotate it, for one, we don't want to rotate it because we don't want to add any external energy. We want the system to be self-sufficient. And if we did, then I don't know if I have a chalk here, and if you can see. If this is our barrel, our coils are going around like this. So if the level of the compost goes down, then the coils themselves are exposed, and that will cool down the whole system. Whereas the way it was oriented before, very quickly, the coils were here. So the coils themselves cells were never exposed because the compost is a lot higher. That's why we can still use our bottom and center lines. And only the top thermocouple is not as useful.
And being nervous, I forgot to mention, this system doesn't have any external inputs of energy. Once you put the compost in, you don't have to, have any types of external inputs like electricity or heat. Any other questions?
Just you better use a little bit of statistical analysis.
Yeah.
And just compare your results and see if you do actually have a significant difference between those parameters you mentioned, your highest temperatures and the differences in cell.
It's just we didn't have time to put it on.
That's fine, as long as you're thinking about it. Good, thanks guys. Okay, so onward. Now we go to group number 9, Tiffany and Felina. Okay. Oh,
Unless
okay.
you are.
That's fine, if you guys are ready, that's fine.
I'm mentally ready.
Melissa and Claire.